Thanks for staying with us. Time now for African News with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Seleka rebels are moved out of Bangui bases as Central Africa Republic forms a new transitional government. The UN warns the crisis-hit country is at a critical juncture. Also, Egypt's top military commander is expected to turn in his credentials as army chief in order to run for the presidency. And it went down to the wire, but Ghana's under-20s women's football team has qualified for this year's World Cup in Canada. The Black Princesses beat Equatorial Guinea after a penalty shootout in Accra. First up, though, Central African Republic's formed a new transitional government. This as the UN warns that the country is at a critical juncture. Authorities are hoping to stem the violence that's followed last year's Seleka rebel takeover. Dozens fled or were moved out of military bases by peacekeepers in Bangui on Monday. Many Muslim groups' influence is waning, but the damage has already been done. Thousands have been killed, many more displaced, and Central African Muslims face bloody revenge attacks by Christian vigilante groups. As the battle for order continues, civilians also flee the threat of former rebel groups. Our correspondent sent us this report from neighbouring Democratic Republic of Congo.
A few hundred meters away, Bangui. In the distance, heavy gunfire can be heard. Just above the military camp Kasai, where the ex-Seleka was stationed, white smoke rises. A few minutes later, the first Central Africans crossed the river to seek protection.
We are scared. We can't stay there. Last night there were clashes, a lot of gunfire. So many shooting that we couldn't sleep. Every day from morning till night it's like that. That's why it's better for us to come here to rest.
Like Corinne and her family, more than 6,000 people from Bangui went to find refuge on the Congolese side of the river. All of them are registered here. Like Augustin, a few hours ago he was still living a nightmare, arrested and beaten by the ex-Seleka.
I went to sell my goods on the market. That's when the Seleka caught me. They took everything from me, my belongings, my money. They tied my hands and started beating me with knives and weapons. They left me on the side of the road. One of them cut my ear off.
Every day, new boats from Bangui arrive. Some manage to take a few belongings with them. All leave a country that's torn apart.
Now, Egypt's top military commander is expected to turn in his credentials as army chief in order to run for the presidency. The Supreme Council for the Armed Forces has given Abdel Fattah al-Sisi its backing to run in April elections. This 7 months after he spearheaded the ousting of former President Mohamed Morsi. Thousands turned out to Tahrir Square on Saturday in support of his potential candidacy. Our correspondent says he's all but guaranteed to win.
Field Marshal, as he is now, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, certainly has an incredible amount of popular support here. I mean, a lot of Egyptians really see him as a hero, you know, the man who saved Egypt from the Muslim Brotherhood when he overthrew Mohamed Morsi in July last year. Now, since then, we've really been seeing what can only be described as Sisi mania gripping the country, with the popular campaigns calling for him to run for the presidency. Also, there really don't seem to be any other serious contenders, so he is expected to win by a landslide if he does run. And I think in such a politically charged atmosphere where anyone who voices any dissent against the army or against Sisi is seen as a traitor or a terrorist, it's really going to be very difficult for any other presidential candidates to campaign against him unless they come from an army background too. And I think many secular political activists and revolutionaries, as well as Morsi supporters, are seeing this as proof that Mohamed Morsi's ouster was a coup and a way of bringing a military president to power. But I think now it really does seem like a done deal that Egypt will have President Sisi in power before the summer.
Tunisia's new constitution was finally signed on Monday, a significant step in returning stability to the country after decades of dictatorship, a revolution, and 2 years of arguments and discord.
Putting pen to paper, Tunisia's new constitution is now official. Interim President Monsef Marzouki said its ratification constituted a historic moment for the country.
It's a proud day for our country, one that will be remembered in the history of Tunisia and which will be celebrated by future generations. Today, we are celebrating our victory over a terrible dictatorship that we hope to never repeat in our country. The dictatorship that we managed to bring down during the December Revolution, its martyrs, its heroes, and its wounded.
The constitution was voted on Sunday evening. The final text features a number of articles relating to religious freedoms. Ruling party Ennahda had to remove certain references to Islam to get the text approved. There's also a clause that calls for male-female parity in legislative assemblies, an important step for Tunisian women. Meanwhile, Prime Minister delegate Mehdi Joma has put forward a cabinet of political neutrals. The interim premier said he chose these individuals for their competence, independence and integrity. Yet the country's interior minister, Lofti Benjedou, will stay for the time being, despite many calling for this Ennahda politician to step down. The cabinet will be tasked with steering the country towards presidential and parliamentary elections later this year. This relative consensus comes after months of political upheaval and strife, much of it between Islamist and secular factions. Conflict peaked last year with the assassination of 2 opposition politicians. Lawmakers are now hoping that this new constitution will send a message of stability and unity to those both in and outside of Tunisia.
France has decided to redeploy forces across Africa's Sahel. Around 3,000 troops will be stationed across countries across the region in a bid to be more reactive in tackling threats posed by extremist militants and jihadist trafficking. Nicolas Chemin has the story.
The French defence minister regularly hails his country's military intervention in Mali as a success. Launched a year ago, it forced jihadists to flee northern Mali. But they then spread across the Sahel, especially in southern Libya. To combat Islamic extremists and jihadist trafficking, France has decided to reorganize its military bases in the region. Jean-Yves Le Drian explained the aim of this plan.
Plus de réactivité.
We want to be more reactive, more available, and have a unique commander for the force. This is a long-term mission. It will cover the whole region with several bases. In all, there will be 3,000 soldiers in that zone permanently.
These 3,000 soldiers will be positioned in Gao in Mali, in Niamey in Niger, and in N'Djamena in Chad. The logistical base will be in the port of Abidjan in Ivory Coast. The special forces will be in the capital of Burkina Faso, Ouagadougou. France is not increasing the number of its troops in Africa, but relocating some of them. Aside from this new organization, France also has more than 3,000 soldiers in 3 other countries on the continent: Djibouti, Gabon, and Senegal.
It went down to the wire, but Ghana's under-20s women's football team have qualified for this year's World Cup in Canada. The Black Princesses beat Equatorial Guinea after a penalty shootout in Accra. Ghana now joins Nigeria as the only 2 African teams in the tournament. Our correspondent, Katerina Vitozzi, reports.
Crunch time for Ghana's under-20s women's team. The Black Princesses lost the first leg of this qualifier to Equatorial Guinea. To get to their 3rd consecutive World Cup, then, they needed a 2-goal win. But a trip to Canada this summer wasn't the only thing riding on this match.
If we want to ask for more benefits, motivation, it goes with winning games so that it will be a justification for you to ask for some more inputs. In the past, the initial stages when we started women's football, we're now getting the support from the ministry, the government and corporate institutions. But now the ministry and government and the Football Association has agreed and accepted the concept that women's football has come to stay in our country.
To stay and to be very successful. 2 years ago, Ghana's under-17s were the first ever African women's team to be World Cup runners-up. With the medals comes greater support and respect.
As women, to see a fellow woman playing football and then going up and up to the World Cup, we feel really, really good. We feel important.
This game went to penalties and in Ghana's favour. Thanks to government funding, each player gets a $4,000 bonus for winning, so there's plenty to celebrate. This will be Captain Priscilla Okiere's 2nd World Cup. She has a clear message for girls who want to follow in her footsteps.
If you really want to make it to the top, if you really, really know what you want, you really have to take this kind of things, hard work, perseverance, and you have to be strong as well.
But organisers say extra funding is crucial too. They want to secure more corporate sponsorship to help push this women's under-20s team all the way to a World Cup final.
Well done, them. Well, that wraps up, though, African news for me. I'm going to hand you back now to Mark Owen, who'll bring you more news and headlines from around the world.
Beyond Business.
Doing good is good for business. That's the thinking behind corporate social responsibility, a term increasingly used by companies, but doesn't make them better global citizens. We head to China, where scandals have put the spotlight on businesses behaving badly.
Beyond Business on France 24 and France24.com.